Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Awesome Sunday Show. Connor here.
Pat, as always.
Yep, and today it's just me and Pat. There is no guest, but there probably will be a guest next time. I said guest a little weird there,
Yeah,
but that's
you
fine. So, Pat, you know the hugely successful critically audience and technically box office, even though I'm being sarcastic, Batman vs. Superman.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Your friend.
No, not my friend. I hate that movie.
Definitely your friend.
And like, dude, all right, that movie is bad on so many different levels, and like I've more than I've told people. Like I can name at least 10 things that I dislike about the movie that isn't like an opinion. It's more of like this is what makes a bad movie.
Right.
Yeah, and all the memes that people are making of like that, like Marvel's for kids and like Batman vs Superman is for adults. That's why people don't like it. You do realize that adults make up most of the population
That are watching it. Yeah.
that are watching it.
It's just people who are butthurt.
Yeah, exactly.
It's getting trashed.
Listen, nobody wants like I want Batman vs Superman to be just as good as any other movie, just like the rest of you. But it's not a good movie. All right. Just like when you vote for a president and he's a bad president, you want him to be a good president, but you have to be honest and say, "Wow, that guy sucked." Like,
Yeah.
You know, it depends on your opinion or whatever, but still, like that's just how it is. And
Patton Oswalt actually in his newest special, which came out. Unfortunately, his wife died the same day. But he was talking about how he was joking about how like the people behind politics push this one person when they have something terrible planned going on to use them as a scapegoat. And he goes like, for one thing, he goes, we got all this oil out in, the Middle East. Let's put in this cowboy guy who can't really talk well and he can't walk in the doors and stuff and looks funny. And then he's like, oh, yeah, we're torturing people. And he's like, oh. And then, in 2008, I voted for Obama, and again in 2012. And then when he first got elected, I'm like, all right, this guy, seems like a great guy, seems real cool, he's level-headed. And then he goes, oh, yeah, so we're just bombing people with all these robots. And he's like, but
Yeah.
you were so cool. It's that type of thing.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, that's a joke to a different degree, but yeah.
right. It's just it's about being honest. It's something like, and like a lot of the posts that people are making is just I almost feel like it's disingenuous. Like they want to like it, but they don't really like it.
Right.
It's kind of like I don't know.
It's like defending your favorite sports team that's terrible.
Yeah, but
being a
defending
Red Sox fan.
But defending them when they're not good,
Yeah.
like calling them a good team.
Yeah, like anytime, like Red Sox fans like Conway or Matt Hoffman.
Yeah, or like Eagles fans like Bill Pivett's. Like,
or my brother.
But I respect Bill because he like even though he'll defend them because he's a diehard fan, he knows when they're bad.
Oh yeah,
he
has no problem criticizing.
Like when they give up like 3 draft picks for the number 1 pick.
5 for the
Five.
number 2.
5, yeah, for the number 2. Sorry, that's even worse. I should have just went with what I said because it sounded better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like again, like they're at least honest about like when a team is bad, their favorite team, which actually is like speaks better to a character because at least they stay with their team even when they're bad.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't do.
Robbie.
Yeah. Yeah, but the Rangers are terrible now too.
Yeah.
5-0 was the last game. They're done.
Something like that. Yeah, I think they got swept.
Yeah. So anyway, back into the point. So sometimes movies are bad, movies are good, and especially with comic book movies are adaptations. They're adapted screenplays. So obviously things have to be sacrificed for something to be transferred to screen, or something has to be added in order for something to make sense for the movie to flow for a 2 to 2.5 hour time.
Or just switch it up.
Or yeah, exactly. Just to put a twist on the story. So my topic today is how come certain adaptations work more than others, and like what makes those work. And what was making me think was, when you look back at the 90s, the 90s had a really cool style with comic book movies. Not all of them were good. Most of them were not good.
Most of them were pretty damn bad.
But stylistically, I liked them because they pretty much copied off Tim Burton's Batman, except for the mask. Even though the mask tonally is kind of dark, it's still kind of made for kids. But the original Mask comic book is really different from the movie with Jim Carrey.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like super gory, the comic. there's actually a character in the comic that I can't remember his name, but he's this big like Ophis looking guy, but he's actually super intelligent, but he loves pain.
Yeah.
So like he'll carve, he'll like make a smiley face in his hand but with nails and just keep like he's like that type of dude, and he's like envious of the Mask cuz like they're both just as crazy in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's parts in the comic where like they actually legitimately torture people, and in the movie when, you know, Jim Carrey makes like a Tommy gun out of whatever paper mache, or I forget the part of the movie, but then like they like it's comedic, like it says bang instead of killing somebody. Where in the comic it literally like they turn them into like sausage, straight up. But The Mask is also a good movie. I like that movie a lot.
I like that movie a lot too.
It's great, and it's not.
You know what's even better?
What?
Son of the Mask.
Nope.
I'm kidding.
I hate that movie.
I'm kidding. That movie was fucking an abomination.
But speaking of Son of the Mask, Jamie Kennedy, he did like a documentary called Heckler.
Yeah.
And like
that wasn't bad.
But like I never saw it, but supposedly like the first 10 minutes are about like hecklers in comics, and then like some of the movie, like most of the movie deters into like how critics are the worst hecklers.
Yeah.
Because like his movies were never like,
he's never made a good movie in his life.
Yeah, or he's never been a part of a good movie.
Although Malibu's Most Wanted's pretty great.
I hate that movie.
You're a fag.
But like so that movie's terrible, Son of the Mask. But yeah, like The Mask works. So even though it's really different from the comic, but yet The Mask, I think the reason why that movie works is because in the movie it's The Mask, but I think in the comic it's called like the Big Head Murderer, Big Head Killer, but they're still the same personality. So while tonally the movies are different, the character is still the same.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Adam West Batmans work really well, because even though those are stupid and campy and they have like shark repellent and the bat dance and stuff like that,
so great.
It's great, but Bruce Wayne is still Bruce Wayne. So
it's almost like a parody.
Yeah, it's a parody, but
Batman 66.
But it still it still respects the characters. You know, like for example, Street Fighter, which is adapted from Street Fighter 2 with Jean-Claude Van Damme. That movie's terrible, not because it's a terrible movie, but because it literally does not respect any of the characters for the original video game.
Right.
Neither did Street Fighter 5, but that's a totally different story.
You know, at least when Mortal Kombat did it, they were pretty accurate, but the movies were just bad.
Yeah, but they're enjoyably bad.
Well, yeah, but they're not good movies, but you like them because of how bad they are, because you like those characters a lot.
Yeah, and like
they're still pretty faithful.
With the exception of Sub-Zero and Scorpion, like every character is pretty on point. And the only reason why Scorpion and Sub-Zero were bad guys because they were under his, you know, Shang Tsung's control, which was like kind of stupid, but I mean they needed more villains. It worked out for the movie's favor actually. Yeah, so like it's weird like with adaptations, I guess, as far as like what works and what doesn't work, and we still see that today with Batman vs Superman and the Marvel movies, because even though the Marvel movies change a lot as far as like Ultron being created by Iron Man, not Henry Pym, but yet it's still Ultron.
Yeah,
it's still that character, so that movie works like, very successfully.
They just change a little bit of the background.
Exactly, and I think that's what I want to dive into today. As far as like, you know, we can talk like however you want to talk about it.
Speaking about Batman vs Superman and Age of Ultron, a lot of the butthurt Batman vs Superman fans are like, "Well, Age of Ultron was terrible." Age of Ultron is not terrible.
It's great.
It's great. Was it as good as Avengers 1? No. Is it kind of over the place? Yeah. Did they try to cram in some stuff? Yeah. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't, you know, fantastic like it should have been.
Yeah.
But it's
a solid movie.
It's still a solid movie. It's nowhere near as ridiculously bad as Batman.
Yeah, and like that.
And there's a ton of stuff that didn't make sense, but
even the stuff that didn't make sense was still good.
Yeah, it still worked.
Yeah, like the whole Black Widow and Bruce Banner romance that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was written so well, and it was acted so good too that I didn't care. Like
plus, the greatest GIF of all time came out of that.
Oh my god, dude, that GIF is amazing.
Like the zucchini.
Yeah, that when you sent me that, I cried like laughing. I
so
literally
funny.
died. But yeah, that works because even though it's out of nowhere, it's written so well that I forget about it.
Yeah, and it was created for the movie. It's not.
Yeah,
that
in the
happens.
comics, Black Widow and Captain America are together for some of it. Not all, not every comic line, but yeah, because the reason why it worked is because there was some relatability between characters as far as like being monsters. Like Scarlett Johansson is far from looking like a monster. Holy crap! But she was from a little girl. She was trained to be a killer, and then like they reveal in the movie, spoilers, that her that they worked on her ovaries.
They pretty much dewomanized.
Yeah, they worked on her ovaries so she couldn't give birth anymore. So to her, what's up?
Or have a period or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
She couldn't have any womanly distractions.
Exactly. So like even though she's beautiful on the outside, like she has inner torment because she feels like she's a monster for things she did and like how she can't even create life. She feels like a human weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with that's one of Bruce Banner's concerns. He's like, what if we have kids? Like, what are they going to be like? And she's like, you don't have to worry about that. So there's actually, even though like Bruce Banner's the physical monster, Scarlett Johansson or Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, is like, she's the emotional monster.
Yeah.
So it works together. So yeah, it's out of nowhere and like it doesn't make any sense, but it's so good that I didn't care. And yeah, and like Avengers Age of Ultron overall, I would give that movie like an 8 out of 10. It's a solid movie. Like yes, there's flaws with it, but like the stuff that is good is so good. That whole scene, the two scenes that I loved in that movie was the scene where they have the party and they're just hanging out. I could have watched an hour and a half of that. Literally could have watched an hour and a half of them just hanging out. And the scene where they're at where they go to Hawkeye's house and it's like in the middle of like I don't want to say nowhere, but it's like upstate New York or something like that.
It's like a random farmhouse.
Yeah, it's a random farmhouse, but like you actually get to know the characters. That's the whole scene with Black Widow and the Hulk. And
Joss had to fight to keep that in.
Yeah, and that was one of the best scenes in the movie. And then like, if the movie was just those two scenes, I feel like it probably would have been amazing. Even like, obviously there wouldn't have been any action, but the whole like dialogue between Captain America and Iron Man, where he like rips the log apart, you know, that which is such like a little foreshadowing to Civil War.
One of the many instances between them.
Yeah, but anyway, we're being distracted. But yeah, like, but those are still the characters. Like that's still Captain America. That's still Hawkeye. Batman vs Superman, when that's adapted, they literally made two Batmans, one with powers and one without powers. So Superman's like not even Superman in that movie, and he's just like, you know, Batman's a vigilante. Then what the hell are you? Because you murdered thousands of people. I know I've said that point like 4 times in the show, but it's really true. Like it was adapted poorly. Spawn was adapted poorly because, I mean, they didn't really hurt the character that bad, but like. And John Leguizamo as the clown, that demon, was like perfect casting, but the screenplay was just atrocious.
Yeah, it was a really bad screenplay.
And their special effects are super dated.
Yeah. I mean, like, the effects back then weren't great, but it just didn't fit well. Like, that movie, Spawn is extremely dark, but they tried making it pretty campy. Yeah. Which I think hurt it a lot.
Well, you know what it was?
Granted, there is some ridiculousness to it in the comics, especially the clown character, but still.
Yeah. The thing with like Spawn, I think the reason why that wasn't as successful as Batman, because Tim Burton's Batman, that screenplay is goofy, but every aspect of the movie, as far as Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, Tim Burton, the set designer, the cinematographer, they take the movie extremely seriously.
Right. So
like the goofy stuff in the screenplay and the dialogue is like kind of welcome actually. Whereas in Spawn, it's the opposite problem. Whereas like this screenplay and like the dialogue like takes itself way too seriously, and then the special effects were not even good back then. And then like there's even scenes in the movie where like it looks like Microsoft Paint cut off. And like whenever the devil talks, he has that stupid like cartoon like generic devil voice that sounds like this.
To be fair,
and his mouth never moves.
They probably had like a micro fraction of the budget Batman did, because of how like Batman is arguably one of, if not the most popular comic book character of all time.
Right.
And Spawn is nowhere near that. Like I'm sure most people wouldn't still know who Spawn is, and especially not then. You know, Spawn is more of like I guess is probably the only way to put it. He's more of a cult character.
Yeah, he is a cult character, but cult characters can still be successful. Deadpool, Ant-Man. all Marvel characters. We'll see with Suicide Squad if that's successful or not. Which I really do want that movie to be good. That trailer that was just released was really good.
It was fucking awesome.
It was really
the way
good.
that they're
really
using
good.
music in the last 2 trailers has been excellent. Like especially the songs they picked. Like
totally totally ripped from Guardians of the Galaxy, but it still works as far as like as far as like picking like random songs that like
way better than the Comic-Con trailer.
Oh yeah, yep. The Comic-Con, and like I think I will like people are worried about the reshoots to make it more funny.
That's not confirmed that's why. Like movies do reshoots all the time.
Yeah, they do.
It's just people, given the timing of it, people are like, oh, they're probably adding in jokes and stuff.
Yeah, but I wouldn't even. I don't think that's too far from the truth though. As far
there
as
probably had
humor.
been some rewrite a little bit.
Yeah, because they probably looked at Batman vs Superman and they're like, whoa. There's like one joke in the movie and it's not even funny.
Yeah. Plus, if you have the Joker and Harley Quinn in it, they have to be funny.
They have to be. And
like
that's
Joker is a murderous psychopathic maniac who gets dark as shit.
Yeah.
But he always takes everything as a joke.
I'm starting to warm up to Jared Leto, and I'm starting to warm up to the tattoos too. Actually,
I'm warmed up to him. I still don't give it. The tattoos still don't do it for me. But
yeah,
if he's great, I wouldn't give a shit.
Exactly, because and that's the thing too with adaptation is when we were at Manhattan Bagel before talking about Will Smith as Captain America, people I remember like years ago that was a rumor before they even started pre-production for the first Avenger when it was just actually it was pre-production because they're looking for cast, but that Will Smith was rumored that like to be tapped in for the role, and people were like, oh well, Captain America's not black. It's not the fact that he's black, it's just the fact that Will Smith is Will Smith in almost every movie. Not that not that he's not Will Smith in other movies like Pursuit of Happiness, which is awesome. But it's just like, dude, like Captain America is Captain America for his personality. Like I can't.
And there is a black Captain America.
That's the Falcon. Yeah. Like if they if the Falcon.
If they had gone with that character for Captain America.
Yeah.
First instead of Steve Rogers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Your point exactly about Will Smith is most of the time he's playing, or at least lately, he's playing Will Smith.
Exactly.
Will Smith.
Which would have been a poor choice and would have been a poor adaptation.
Definitely, it wouldn't have worked. That's why I've said it before, and when we were talking about it. I still don't want him to be Deadshot. I'm nervous about it.
No, yeah,
and then I really don't want him to be in the Batman solo movie.
No,
at all.
But like now, if the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when Chris Evans finally is like, listen, I'm done playing this character, and they either want to make the Winter Soldier or Anthony Mackie, the Captain America, that's awesome because not only does that follow the characters and follows the story, but like it's. I just like those actors a lot.
They are really good.
And that's example of good adaptation. Even though it might be a little different, the characters and who they are still there. And like I just can't stand when movies lose that. That's what happened with Deadpool and X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, that's not even like the same character at all.
Wade
Wilson originally, because he was, while he's still Wade Wilson, he was a smart ass, like had crazy talents and stuff. But then when he became Deadpool, that's not Deadpool.
Yeah, it was terrible.
The only thing that was Deadpool about that was his healing factor, and that was it. That was a god-awful adaptation. Yeah,
that was terrible, too. And that actually, I kind of feel bad like for the actors in that movie. What's his name? Liv Schreiber?
Yeah.
I thought that was an excellent choice for Beast. Or not for Beast, Sabretooth.
Sabretooth, yeah.
He was an excellent choice for Sabretooth. In fact, like I thought his character was way better in that movie than the Sabretooth in the first movie.
Oh, definitely.
Who had no lines or just stood there. And it's like, I love that movie when it first came out, the original X-Men movie, and I still like it.
Yeah.
But like looking back, it's like, dude, I love Sabretooth in the X-Men stories. And like this Sabretooth sucks.
He did.
So bad.
He did. Liev Schreiber's character was much better.
I wish Liev Schreiber was in the original movie and like actually had like to act. Because the whole like dilemma between Sabretooth and Logan throughout the X-Men stories is incredible.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. Even in like the animated show from the 90s, it was a great like recurring theme.
And like Sabretooth was never a good guy, but he's never like he was never a bad guy. He was in the Brotherhood of Mutants, but he still like had his own thing going. Right. And he was more looking out for himself than, being a part of something bigger. And like it just sucks because that was the only good part about X-Men Origins Wolverine, actually, and of course,
Obviously, Hugh Jackman.
and Hugh Jackman, but Hugh Jackman
that goes without saying.
Yeah, dude, he could be in a terrible movie like Real Steel, and I still like him.
Yeah, he's the man.
By the way, did you ever see Real Steel?
No, I knew I was like, yeah, it doesn't look good.
It's laughably bad.
Like I saw that, and he was in Chappie too, right?
Yeah, I forgot about that
I
movie.
saw the trailer. I'm like, no, thanks. Sorry, Hugh, I love you, but no thanks.
Yeah, but he was great in Prisoners.
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean, that whole movie is great, but he was excellent.
Yeah, he was great. I thought Jake Gyllenhaal would have stole the show before I went into that movie, but Hugh Jackman, and not saying Jake Gyllenhaal didn't do an excellent job, he killed it in that movie.
It's just Hugh Jackman was better.
Yeah, dude, Hugh Jackman, when he has the hammer and he's just beating the sink, dude, I jumped
It was
during that
brutal,
scene.
man. That movie, like those scenes were that whole movie is pretty fucking brutal.
Yeah, dude, Paul
Like
Dano.
emotionally and those scenes. Yeah, poor Paul Dano.
Dude, yeah, he gets beat up in every movie he's in ever, and even that new movie coming out, Swiss Army Man. He's like the trailer it opens with him hanging himself.
Yeah,
he just constantly gets destroyed. But okay, anyway, going back, for you, to go on with the conversation, for you. I guess I know this is a loaded question. You may not have an answer right away, but in your opinion, what is for comic book? What is the worst adaptation, and what is the best adaptation? Doesn't mean it has to be the worst movie or the best movie, but what do you think worked the best from comic to screen?
Oof. I mean, I know it's something really difficult. Not exactly difficult, but sometimes costumes are really difficult that they don't work on the screen. Like we've talked at length about the yellow X-Men costumes.
It doesn't have to be movies though. Television also counts.
Or television. Okay,
yeah. That makes it a little easier.
Yeah, those don't work as well. But I mean, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is
yep,
ultimate. And even though Tony Stark originally was not as comedic, a little more serious, but he still had a lot of Robert Downey Jr.'s characters to him, and I think that was incredibly well adapted. And then the casting has almost all the time been great, even on DC side.
Yeah,
even the Green Lantern movie, as terrible as that was, Ryan Reynolds made a good Hal Jordan.
Yeah,
it's just the movie was bad.
Right.
Mark Strong as Sinestro was perfect.
Yeah, that to this day I still think that's one of the greatest comic book casting choices of all time.
Absolutely.
It just sucks it was attached to a terrible movie.
Yeah, it does. And some storylines, like the Winter Soldier storyline, was brilliantly done.
Mm-hmm.
The Dark Knight Return suit for Batfleck, excellent.
Yep.
One of the things that's going on right now that I think works really, really well on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the Inhumans, because they can't do the royal family because a movie was planned, even though it just got removed from the schedule, but they're using B and C Inhumans and creating some and making it interesting because most people don't know the Inhumans.
Yeah.
And some people who do, they're oh well, they're a knockoff X-Men. Kind of, sort of, I guess, but there's a lot more depth to them. The Inhumans, the royal family alone, is Game of Thrones with superpowers.
Yeah, and I've heard that before. I don't really know much about the Inhumans, really at all. The only I've actually I've heard of them, but I remember the first thing that comes to mind is that really shitty video game was Marvel Nemesis: Rise of the Imperfects.
I've never even heard of that game.
It was bad. And I thought it was related to that, and then they're not at all whatsoever. So I've heard of the Inhumans. I know what they are now, but I just don't know much about it.
Their most recent releases haven't been that great, but from their first run to up to a couple of years ago were great. And the thing is, there's so much potential there, and but it's gonna be difficult to adapt, especially the royal family, because the queen is named Medusa, and she basically has prehensile hair.
So it's but the Inhumans, they're not mutants.
They're not mutants, but because the way mutants work, they have a certain gene,
Yeah,
that gives them their various powers or transformations. Or
Right.
whatever.
It's supposedly the next step in evolution for man.
The way the Inhumans work is they were created by the Kree. They were designed to have these genes in them, and then they go through this process called pterogenesis, and that awakens their powers or the gifts.
Okay.
So they were created, but mutants were naturally occurring.
So that's the major difference, essentially.
Yeah.
There's more of an artificial take on, which is like a terrible like word to describe a person, but it's a comic book character. But like as far as for someone that's like Superboy, I guess we can be considered a Inhuman if that was part of Superboy was part of Marvel.
Yeah.
Someone that's created. Okay.
Yeah, they were created for that. Like they're specifically designed like that. But the similarities, obviously most mutants, they get their powers at some point in their life. They're not everyone is like born with it. Sometimes something occurs.
Yeah, but in the mutants and X-Men, they usually get their powers around puberty.
Yeah. Something changes them, and that's what pterogenesis does. And some mutants, their physical transformations are extreme. Same thing goes for Inhumans, or something. It's something more like, like Cyclops. They develop these, powers that one day will just happen. Mm-hmm. And while not completely physical, granted, Cyclops' eyes are pretty much always.
He wasn't born that way, though.
He wasn't born that way. Yeah, it occurred.
It occurred, but also the fact that he can't stop his laser beams. I think it's the result of an accident.
Yeah.
He originally could control it, but then he got hit in the head, and it was like done from there.
Yeah, and it's things like that. There's physical transformations. There's not. Although Agent Shield is able to use a very popular Inhuman, Quake, Daisy Johnson, who was Skye, who's been the main actress since the first season. Since the first episode, really. And they're doing a really great job with that. And, Agent S.H.I.E.L.D., they obviously can't use the biggest storylines in the world.
Yeah.
But even, the Winter Soldier,
mm-hmm.
we find out, Hydra has been in S.H.I.E.L.D. all these years. They used that adaptation from the movies into their own show.
Okay.
And I think it saved the show. Even though it started to pick up a little bit before that, but it saved the show. So they took an adaptation from a comic that was adapted into a major movie, and then they adapted that to fit its own show. And I think they're doing well with that. And then I think
because the characters are still the characters.
Characters are still the characters, exactly. And then another excellent adaptation is The Flash, Reverse Flash. I think was incredibly well done. And again, that's because it was so well casted, and the writing for it is great because they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Bad Adaptation, I think. I mean, Batman vs Superman has a whole mess of problems.
That's more than a bad adaptation.
It's just a bad movie more so than a bad adaptation. I think it's a mix of both, but I think it's a worse movie than a worse adaptation.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know. It just fails on so many different levels. I can't even think of an analogy to for someone who hasn't seen it what it's like, because they wanted it for it's weird because for production, everybody involved with that movie saying how anti-Marvel it is, it so wanted to be Marvel seeing that movie.
Oh, absolutely.
It was so it's like a band that before they talk about an album, this is new stuff, blah blah blah, and it sounds like everything else that's been out.
It's like when 4 Year Strong released in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
and they suddenly turned into a Foo Fighters knockoff.
Exactly, that's awesome. Or but then there's also there's not it could be successful because then there's songs that Blink-182 released that sound a lot like The Cure.
Yeah,
but also Blink is still Blink though.
Right.
They didn't really change.
Yeah.
Whereas before You're Strong, they changed.
They changed completely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that Batman vs Superman was bad is because they tried adapting they could have made 5 different movies out of that movie because they tried adapting 5 different major arcs, major ones, not small things into a movie, but major things. Specifically The Dark Knight Returns. I don't give a shit what Zack Snyder says. He tried ripping that off so much. It's completely obvious. Blatant ripoff, and he's like, nah, there's just a little bit of inspiration. bullshit. And then the death
That movie
Superman.
is The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah. And the death of Superman. I don't think they should have used that in Batman vs Superman. They could have saved it for Man of Steel 3 or whatever.
Yeah, or it's such a it's such a metaphor for the DCEU, Superman dying and coming back to life, because that's already happened with Green Lantern. That was supposed to kick off the DCEU, and now now they're doing it almost again with Suicide Squad, and as far as Batman being tapped, or Batman Affleck being tapped for a Batman movie, they're trying to save themselves again.
Yeah,
and it's so annoying.
It is.
It's. I don't want to go. I know we talked about it way too much.
Yeah.
How bad that movie is.
Another terrible adaptation, I think, was the Daredevil movie.
That was
Ben
awful.
Affleck. And that's one instance where the suit shouldn't have been adapted to live action like that. In the comics, it looks cool. This red leather suit, whatever. It's a comic book, but in real life, dude, it looks terrible. Not to mention the characters there were so poorly written. I couldn't even recognize Elektra at all, other than she had the size.
Liar.
Yeah.
I hate that line.
Although apparently the director's cut is better, makes
is.
it a decent movie. I've never seen the director's cut. I don't really want
that
to.
movie, I feel bad for people involved in that movie, because that movie shouldn't have been bad. It just is bad for reasons that were kind of that were studio controlled. Yeah, the screenplay was not good, but the talent behind it could have made it better. Michael Clark Duncan as Kingpin was a great casting choice.
There's a lot of talent there that I don't think was poorly casted.
And I think Ben Affleck was not bad as Matt Murdock, but when you have lines where it starts raining and he asks to stand there, he goes, "You are so beautiful," and it's but meanwhile, you are blind and she doesn't know you're Daredevil.
Yeah,
just makes no sense, because then she's surprised that he's Daredevil. By the way, his chin looks exactly like the guy you just had sex with, and he asks you to stand in the rain and says you're beautiful. If that doesn't scream Daredevil, I don't know what does. So that movie, the actors, the director, I don't think I think that I don't like that movie, but I don't hate on it as much as most people do, because it's not everyone's fault. With that movie, it's barely ever really is the actor's fault. Actually, it's very few movies you're dude, that it was except for Jennifer Gardner, she was awful in that movie, and I like her as an actress.
Yeah, I mean, but she was poorly written too.
Exactly.
But
liar.
I mean, that's not to say that it's not always the actor's fault. There's a lot who phone it in, but that's an instance where it's just everything else was bad. Another adaptation that was really bad was in Spider-Man 3. Not the entire movie. I liked Sandman.
Oh yeah,
That's
half of a great movie.
Was
Spider-Man
Venom
3
in that movie? Venom.
I forgot about
was
that.
So poorly
because it's not
done.
Venom.
It's not Venom. It's fucking Eric Foreman in a black suit.
Yep.
And that's all. Cause that's all Topher Grace can do. And it sucks because, you get such a role on such a great show like that, and he played it for 8 years or whatever.
Yeah, I think the show.
Well, it's great because you have recognition for that, and you were on a show for that long, a successful show. Unless you do something to completely separate you from that role, people only ever think of you like that.
Bryan Cranston did that successfully.
Oh yeah, from fucking Malcolm in the Middle to
Breaking Bad,
and
then which he was excellent in Godzilla, and then he plays Lyndon B. Johnson on a play that was supposed to be amazing.
And then he was fucking Martin Trumbo.
I haven't seen that movie yet.
It's not that great, but he's excellent.
Yeah.
But he was able to do something like that. Topher Grace, maybe he's just not. He doesn't have the skill that.
See, I disagree, because Predators, while that was a bad movie, he was awesome in it.
Okay, but all right, but at least in the instance of Spider-Man 3, he played Eddie Brock like Eric Foreman.
Yep, exactly. It was
which was part of the reason it was bad.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was waiting for him to say, I'm pissed at Donna.
Yeah, like Eddie Brock, he just made him such a bitch. Eddie's not a bitch.
And it was a mix between Ultimate Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man, or Spectacular Spider-Man, whatever. Or there's also Web of Spider-Man too, but those are pretty much all the same thing. But because in Ultimate Spider-Man, Eddie Brock is not the same Eddie Brock. There's a lot of different characters, same characters, but the symbiote even though it wasn't an alien in Ultimate Spider-Man, it still had the characteristics of like what made Venom great.
Right.
So like I don't like that. Like granted, Ultimate Spider-Man I don't think is the best Spider-Man line ever. A lot of people love it, but it's great in some areas. The Kingpin in Ultimate Spider-Man is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Holy crap! He's probably one of the best villains out of that line. But that wasn't Venom. Like
right.
The simp and like that movie. I feel really bad for that movie too because that's not all Sam Raimi.
Venom was shoehorned in.
Yeah,
I don't even know. I don't even know if he wrote Venom. Because he wrote the script or co-wrote the script. I'm not sure.
He wanted
if he
the black suit, but he wanted to keep Venom for a different movie. He wanted to
for Spider-Man 4.
Exactly, and he wanted like that and the inner torment that Peter Parker goes through in that movie, and then like. The black suit was really symbolic for his anger towards the killer of his uncle, but then like when he tears off the suit and it's kind of like it's him kind of coming to realize like forgiving, like
he's
like
letting it go.
Yeah, he's letting it go, and like that part of the movie is so freaking good. And then you just have, and I like Topher Grace, but then you have like Venom, and then you have the emo dancing scenes. And then you have Gwen Stacy, who's like literally the most useless character I've ever seen in a movie.
And it's funny because you look at Gwen Stacy in that movie and then in the 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies, and it's like complete bimbo.
Yeah.
Like complete like airhead. And then you got Gwen Stacy in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which Emma Stone did excellent in, who is like, as she should, is like really fucking smart.
Yeah.
And, is not useless. She's very useful. She can stand up on her own.
She helps out.
Actually contributes and helps save him.
Yep.
And,
the first Amazing Spider-Man is good.
It is good.
It's good. And the second one, I don't think that's Mark Webb's fault, though, either.
I kind of think it's his fault.
You think so?
I think
All
so.
Right. Because I like him as a director. 500 Days of Summer, I love that movie.
I haven't seen it, so I can't judge
dude,
it. I know it's good, though.
It's
a
one
lot
of those
people
movies.
love it.
It's one of those movies like your girlfriend would like that you picked out because it's a movie she would like, but it's actually a good movie. So
I've heard that before, actually. Yeah. I just haven't seen it. But I kind of think it was his fault.
You think so?
Honestly. I do, because he...
I just think the screenplay was too convoluted and confusing.
Well, he wrote it.
Oh, he did?
That's
why
I think it's his fault. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. That kind of changes my mind then.
And that... I hate that movie so much.
I don't hate it as much as you do.
No,
because I think there's really good ideas in Amazing Spider-Man 2. I thought Jamie Foxx as Electro was cool, except I didn't like the way he looked as Electro.
See, I hated his entire character, to be completely honest.
Yeah. I hated, and I think again, Dane DeHaan, I like him a lot. He's awesome in Chronicle.
He's
Place
a
Beyond the
great
Pines.
actor.
Yeah, it Place Beyond the Behind the Pines, which is Jake Mountner's favorite movie. That he's incredible in that movie, but I hated his character in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I think they just wrote it very poorly. That's an example of bad writing for a good actor.
Yep.
And that's an adaptation that I think didn't work out. Like that character, I don't think worked out very well at all. Like, I get that they wanted to make, the Green Goblin, like, almost like a genetic disease, like, from father to son.
Right.
That's not a terrible idea. It's not.
Yeah.
It's very different from what happened in the Raimi trilogy, where...
But the Raimi trilogy it's actually really far from the comics, whereas
it is.
The Amazing Spider-Man movies...
But that's an example of them taking an element from the comics and then putting their spin on it, and for the most part, making it work.
Yep.
But the Amazing Spider-Man for Electro...
Peter Parker's still Peter Parker.
Yeah. But for Electro and for Green Goblin were bad. And then I hated Rhino in it. And I love Paul Giamatti. I think Paul Giamatti is a terrific actor, one of the best of his generation.
Mm-hmm.
But Rhino was just bad. And it wasn't even his fault. Like, that's writing and directing there.
I think
maybe he hammed it up a lot, but still.
Right, but they also cut a lot from that movie, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Shailene Woodley, who not only is she beautiful, but she's a great actress. She just has a lot of bad movies, unfortunately. She was Mary Jane Watson.
Completely.
Yeah, they cut her out completely, and I think the same probably happened to Paul Giamatti. I don't know for sure, but like I imagine they shot more scenes than him screaming certain lines.
Yeah, I
that
don't think he would
remember.
willingly be in it for only 5 minutes.
Nope.
Even though there's supposed to be a Sinister Six movie after that he was going to be in, but that got
Canceled.
canned.
But I think
I think it wasn't a bad idea for them to cut out Mary Jane Watson, because first of all, that movie was already overstuffed.
yeah.
But second of all, with how that ended, they needed another love interest for Spider-Man 3.
Yep.
The Amazing Spider-Man 3. That ended up being canceled.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people argue because like the Amazing Spider-Man is probably the most faithful adaptation from movie to comic book out of most of the comic book movies I've ever seen. As far as like a lot of people don't know that Peter Parker's parents worked for the government or were part of S.H.I.E.L.D. at one point.
They were part of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then at one point
That's
they were
why
working
Peter
for
Parker-
Hydra and
Yep.
everything.
And that's why Peter Parker is so smart, because is like it kind of comes down like if you're smart, is genetically your kid smart? Well, I guess like in comic book logic, yeah, but like his dad was like a semi-genius. Peter Parker is a literal genius. People don't know that. But like the reason why I think the regular Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi trilogy, works so well is because at a total it's 7 hours worth of content.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to focus on something and sacrifice other things. So they focused on Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson, their relationship, and whatever the villain was, and everybody else was characters for him to care about.
And the love triangle with Harry.
Exactly,
and which I think worked out
which worked out great. And then also Willem Dafoe being Willem Dafoe, saying, "Hey, do whatever you want."
Yeah,
was probably one of the best choices ever as a director.
Yeah,
and
Alfred Molina as Doc Ock.
Yep.
Excellent. Absolutely
exactly.
Excellent. That's a great adaptation right there.
I think they chose. They're like, all right, like let's with those movies. They found the strengths and they decided to make them stronger. With Amazing Spider-Man, as much as I love the decisions they make to make it closer to the comic book, there was too many. It went in too many directions. It was like a little spider web of a movie. There was way too many lines, way too much to go. It was really confusing. Like, there
were some bad editing choices.
There was bad editing choices, and the movie it would go one direction and then bandit it and go another direction, and it was like
Batman vs Superman.
Exactly, like Batman vs Superman. Except Batman vs Superman did it way worse. Amazing Spider-Man 2, even though I don't like that movie, there is good things about it. Like
there's good things about Batman vs Superman.
Yeah, like Ben Affleck as Batman. I understand there's good things about Batman vs Superman, but I just really hate
it's heavily overshadowed.
Yeah, heavily overshadowed. And so like the Sam Raimi trilogy, even though it's not, it's actually it's not.
It's very loose.
It's very loose adaptation. It works because what made the comic books great, that's what they chose to focus on.
Right.
So I think that's what makes comic book movies very successful.
And another good adaptation. Well, actually, it's a good addition because, or I have two answers for this, but it's a good addition to like adding in another character that didn't exist in the comics, but putting them into the fold and then turning them into an awesome character. Phil Coulson, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Clark Gregg. I love Clark Gregg as it is, but when they chose him as Phil Coulson, I think they made Coulson an excellent character.
Yeah.
And he was created for the movie universe.
Yep.
And then, then he was killed in the first Avengers, and then not too long after that, they made S.H.I.E.L.D. and they're like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and they're like, oh yeah, he's alive. Great decision because that show.
Joss Whedon didn't like that decision though.
Yeah, but it was he came up with it. I know, but it doesn't matter because if Clark Gregg wasn't in that show, it would have been even worse when it that
started,
bad stretch.
Yeah.
It would have been even worse and definitely would have got canceled
Clark
before a whole
Gregg
season.
is a great actor. I didn't realize how much he's done before Avengers.
Yeah, he's been in a lot of stuff, and he's even directed. I think it was just one movie, but Choke, which is an adaptation of a Chuck Palahniuk novel, the guy who wrote Fight Club. While not well received critically, I liked it. It was very faithful.
Yeah.
And he did a good job. But yeah, he's still one of the best parts of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then the other one being John Diggle on Arrow. Diggle is the fucking man, and created for the show. And both of them were now added into the comics now.
Yeah.
They both have
I love when that happens.
Been added into the comics.
That happened with Harley Quinn and Terry McGinnis.
Yeah, because they were both created for those respective shows.
Yeah.
And look at that. Harley Quinn is one of the most popular comic book characters now.
Yeah,
and going to be in Suicide
She's
Squad.
on the same. She's probably in if there was a top 20 most famous comic book character, she would be up there.
Yeah, Created for
Absolutely.
Batman the Animated Series. Fucking amazing show. But like Diggle throughout even all the worst parts of Arrow, especially this season, has been consistently great. Consistently great. And, that's a testament to David Ramsey, who does a fantastic job.
Mm-hmm.
But a poor instance of that, at least now it's a poor instance, is also on Arrow with Felicity. Created for the show. First 2.5 seasons, great. And then they fucking ruined that character. And now she's been in the comics since I think some point in the first season, but she was supposed to be like in like 2 or 3 episodes. And they're like, oh no, she's great. Now she's a main character, and now she's became the most popular female on the show after they killed off the second Black Canary. Spoilers, fuck it. Fuck that show. But yeah,
But isn't season 4 your favorite season?
Fuck off. No.
Season 4 of Arrow is your friend.
No, don't say that. That's mean. And then another terrible adaptation was, I think, the Dark Phoenix storyline in X-Men: The Last Stand.
Yeah,
it was bad.
that was awful.
The Phoenix Force is like one of the most powerful cosmic beings, energy things in the Marvel universe.
That's why I'm really upset. Like, I understand. Like, I get why the Inhumans was chosen for the MCU over X-Men, because X-Men, they can't make X-Men movies in the MCU.
Right.
So like, but which sucks too, because the Phoenix Force, just like you said, it's the most powerful, one of the most powerful entities, if not the most powerful. And MCU can never get their hands on it.
Yeah.
And Fox like really screwed it up bad.
Yeah, that was Fox and Brett Ratner combo of doing bad.
And I like Brett Ratner as a director. Like the Rush Hour trilogy, I love that trilogy.
I think he's a better comedy director than anything.
Yeah, in which it's like
those are or comedy action too. Like
comedy action, yeah, which is a great strength to have, because comedy is extremely difficult to do. And I've never seen Tower Heist, but I heard it's a really funny movie. But yeah, I don't think like that was just poor choice. And like that whole scenario and that whole story behind that, because like Bryan Singer was originally attached to direct the third one, but then he wanted to do Superman Returns, which like in the comic book world everyone was freaking out, because it was a continuation of it was going to ignore Superman 3 and 4, which are god awful tragedies. Yeah. Of like they're like Superman 4, it might be the worst comic book movie ever made, more than Batman vs Superman.
I will absolutely agree with that 100%.
Like, Nuclear Man can only have his power from the sun, but yet there are so many scenes where he's inside still having his powers. I hate that. I hate it. I hate that movie.
That's not even the worst part about it.
Yeah, at least like Superman 3 has Richard Pryor. Like, Superman 4 actually might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Superman 4.
Yeah, pretty much.
From one of the best comic book movies ever made, Superman 1. But yeah, like with Bryan Singer coming back saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, Superman Returns is going to take place after Superman 2." Like, imagine there was no DCEU at all right now, and they never made Superman Returns wasn't out yet, and like all we had for DC movies was like the Dark Knight trilogy, which is excellent, then the Tim Burton movies, and then the Richard Donner slash whatever the other Richard like Linklater, I think, is the other director who finished like the last 20% of Superman 2. Those two movies, and then Bryan Singer, who's responsible for X-Men, said, "I'm making Superman movie, and it's going to be a continuation of Superman 2." How much would you freak out?
Oh, I'd lose my shit.
See, that was us like 10 years ago or 12 years ago when Superman Returns came out, and like it's such a shame that adaptation was so bad.
I know, and it sucks that he left before finishing the X-Men trilogy. Yeah, which I think
he came back to it though.
It sucks, yeah, and fucking turn it around.
Yeah,
well, he does owe Matthew Vaughn a lot for First Class too.
Yes,
like because without First Class being so well received and making a lot of money, Days of Future Past might not have happened. And it's a good thing Matthew Vaughn left to do Kingsman, which is a great movie.
I love that movie.
But yeah, Days of Future Past is one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen, I think. But
yeah, and like as a standalone movie, a lot of people criticisms against that movie was like, well, it doesn't make sense with this, and that. I'm like, well, thank God it doesn't, because it's a good movie on its own, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that it doesn't that chronologically it doesn't make sense with the bad X-Men movies.
Right, and plus they're rewriting the timeline, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to fit chronologically anymore.
It doesn't have to fit chronologically, and I'm glad they did that choice, because
And I love how they made fun of it in Deadpool.
they did. Yeah, it was great, and I don't know. My heart still thinks that, like, since Sony like was like, all right, we'll give you Spider-Man, that like Fox one day is gonna be like, all right, like.
I think that combining the X-Men universe with the MCU would make it too big.
Well,
to be honest.
Yes and no. I think it would, because right now Fox is doing fine with X-Men and Deadpool.
Yes.
So I'm fine with them having it. Marvel is like big right now. Their studios, it's insane how much they're doing, and like I think, and I agree
and
with you.
they still have a lot more planned of characters they haven't used yet.
Exactly. The Inhumans, Captain Marvel. There's probably Doctor Strange is coming out soon.
But still, there's a lot to each of those
Black
sets.
Panther.
Like there's still a shit ton of stuff that they can do in the future with those characters.
Exactly. And I like if Fox said, "Hey, like we'll attach this to your universe, but we're still making these movies," I think that would be a good idea, because that way it's not too much on Marvel, and Fox can still do their own thing. Like they can make a solo movie however they want to make it, but then like every once in a while, like, hey, like Wolverine's gonna be in the Avengers or something like that.
That would be fine. But like, see, like with Spider-Man, the way they're doing it is Spider-Man is going to be official part of the MCU. Like he's supposed to be in Infinity War. But if they did that with the X-Men, that's just way. I personally think that it's way too much.
Yeah, but also
until Fox fucks that up, I mean, they
Yeah.
redeemed themselves from X3 and Origins, I guess. But I think they're doing well with that on their own. Plus, there's still so much they haven't done.
Right, exactly. Yeah, true. It's just
And
like,
now with the reset timeline, and with Deadpool now, like there's just even more.
see, like I just like
Do I want some crossover? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, as a comic fan, you want crossover, because the two biggest teams in the Marvel universe, not just cinematic universe, but just the regular universe too, is the X-Men and the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
They're the two biggest teams, and they those teams consist of some of the most powerful mutants / superheroes ever.
Yep.
And there's ideological differences between them as well, as far as like who's more dangerous than the other, like who has to keep one in check.
Yeah.
And like hence Avengers versus X-Men, which has happened more than one time. So I would love to see a movie like that,
Yeah.
But that's that.
And then
I don't want to say
the
it'll ever
Brotherhood
happen.
of Mutants too. Probably the next biggest team, also friggin' ridiculously powerful.
Yep.
So that's three major teams right there. But I think that's a lot for
That is a lot.
one major universe. But now if Fox gave up the rights to Fantastic Four to Marvel, just let him revert, I'd take that.
Yeah. See, now here we go. Back to the adaptation. Let's talk.
I completely forgot that we haven't. I completely overlooked that we haven't talked about them yet.
Yeah. That's. Let's talk about it.
least in
'Cause
this
I have
podcast.
never seen the new Fantastic Four. You've seen it. I've seen.
All right, let's start with the first two.
All right. Well, no. Well, there's the Roger Corman one.
Not that one. Although that one is better than the most recent Fantastic Four.
I think that's the best one, because it's laughably bad. It's enjoyably bad. It's the same reason why Swamp Thing is a great movie.
Wait, did he do the one that was unreleased but then like surfaced online or something?
Roger Corman.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
Or
Roger
did
Corman
he do
production.
the one before that?
No, it's that's the first one. Because that movie was never intentionally made to be released. It was made to keep the rights, because they never wanted to make it at that time.
Okay, so you're talking about the 1994 one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Holy shit, that movie is terrible, but it's fucking hysterical.
Right. It's a good movie because it's bad, and like that. It's funny that that's the reason why it's the best one. And the thing in that movie looks awful. The costumes
Holy
are
crap.
terrible.
Looks like somebody like spray painted cotton balls and put them on.
Exactly. The effects are god awful, and it's just and that's what makes it work. It fails on so many levels that it succeeds as a
And
movie.
it's still better than the most recent Fantastic Four.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it. I want to see it. I feel like that's gonna be like a commentary movie we have to do.
We should. I mean, that was but what was it, 2005 was the start of those two Fantastic Four movies.
Yeah,
2005, 2007.
I want to say yes. I don't know
Right.
exactly.
Those movies are really bad, but
Rise of the Silver Surfer is nowhere near as bad as the first one, but it's still a bad movie.
See, I think it's worse than the first one.
Really?
But I think that's because it makes me angry what they did with Galactus.
That's true.
I think that's why I think it's worse.
That's true. I think as a movie,
I
it's
like
better
Silver Surfer though,
because at least they do superhero things in the Silver Surfer one.
Yeah.
Whereas in the first movie, they do nothing. There's like for a movie about crime fighting, which is essentially every superhero movie ever made.
Yeah.
There is no crime fighting in that movie. They like it's like. You know, I'm not opposed to it because I think Jessica Alba is incredibly hot, but there's literally like they casted her as the Invisible Woman just for an excuse for her to take her clothes off.
Yeah.
And it's like they're
because
she's
at
like, I
that
can't
time
believe
she
I'm
was
doing
really
this again.
big.
Really, you're Jessica Alba. You can't believe you're taking your clothes off again. Like,
Yeah. To be fair though, the characterization of some of those characters were really good. Like I like Michael Chiklis as the Thing a lot.
that was a
And
great choice.
I think he was written well, and like his struggles as the Thing, and his mutation. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty much like he got the worst of it.
and some of the
Think about it.
Yeah, he did.
And I really like the actor who played Doctor Doom. I think he did a great job for a poorly written character.
Right. I think all the actors are good. Jessica Alba I think is a good actress. Like I don't think she's the best ever, but she's good, you know. Like in the Machete movie, I thought she played a good role. Even though she was naked in that too. Digitally though, which she didn't have a problem with actually. She said she like they said that in an interview she's like, yeah, I didn't mind, you know, it's whatever, it's a movie. Like, and in real life she's a cool person too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think the casting was bad in that movie. It just, you know, Chris Evans as Johnny Storm was
great.
Was hilarious. And the one line I really did like in the second movie was when he because Ben Grimm ends up marrying that blind chick that he meets in the first one.
Yeah.
And he starts asking her what sex is like. He's like, because you're like, he's got like a rock penis. And he's like, that's none of your business. And like starts freaking out. That scene was pretty funny. That's why I like the second movie better, is because like there's actually funny scenes. They actually do fight crime and they do like save people. They don't just stand around and like, we have powers, we're celebrities, like smile for the cameras, which is literally the first movie. And then literally I can't in the first movie there's a scene where Johnny Storm, it goes like supernova, and they like, tell him to stop. He's like, why I have to stop? Because you would have destroyed the planet. And then he goes supernova, and then the Invisible Woman puts a shield around it. But like that shield in the comics, from what I remember, the shields weren't that strong.
No, it shouldn't have been able to hold.
It shouldn't have been able to hold against the barrier that you built to hold your powers. It just didn't make sense.
Have worked.
Yeah. But again, so Rise of the Silver Surfer is still a bad movie though, especially because Galactus,
turning
he's a
Galactus
cloud.
into a fucking fart.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Like even Rick and Morty did it better with the fart cloud.
Yeah.
Like that's a better Galactus than anything.
Much better.
And then the most recent one, holy shit, which sucks because that movie should have been so good. Josh Trank just came off Chronicle, which was awesome.
Right.
And surprisingly, it's one of the only two good things Max Landis has ever done, ever written. The other one being American Alien, the Superman arc.
Yeah.
Which I haven't read, but all I hear is that it's great.
Yeah, it's one of the best things DC's put out in years, supposedly. I want to read it though. I'm probably just gonna wait until they do a hardcover compilation.
Max Landis is a douchebag and he's not a great writer. He only got to where he is because of his dad.
I don't think that's 100% true.
For the most
but there's
part.
definitely some truth to that statement.
Yeah. But like he actually wrote that script, but the script he wrote was way better because Fox changed it completely. He put that script that he wrote online and it was way better.
Right.
After the movie came out. And then Josh Trank, great director. And the cast is really fucking
for
good.
For Chronicle or for Fantastic Four?
Fantastic Four. Chronicle, the script stayed relatively the same.
Oh, Max Landis also contributed to the script from Fantastic Four?
Yeah. The original one. And then
so he doesn't have credit for the new
I don't know how they credit it, but he at least wrote like a really solid spec, which I think they used for most of it before they rewrote the
Max
movie
Landis
during it.
is a good writer.
There's talent there, but he's so far up his own ass that it stops.
I think that's the problem people have with him, is because Chronicle, like as a movie and as a screenplay, like when I first saw that movie, the first thing I thought was how good the screenplay was.
Yeah.
Because of how real like the characters were, and like as much as I love comic book movies, and like this isn't a criticism, but like how they react to their powers isn't the most realistic thing ever. But it's a movie, so it has to carry on.
Right.
Like they have to get past it. And like you have to focus on other strengths to make the movie the movie. But Chronicle was like one of the first movies I ever saw where it was like, this is how I would act if I had powers. And like,
Yeah.
but it also too like Dane DeHaan, who we brought up before, who is a really good actor. I believed him the most out of almost any other character I ever saw in a movie who got superpowers and became a villain. And because I'm sorry, I don't remember the actor's name, but the guy that plays his dad is such a piece of crap. But at the same time, you feel so sorry for him, and like because they both have a similar interest of keeping either his wife or his mom alive.
Yeah.
But they just don't see eye to eye on
Anything.
on anything besides that. So
They both treat each other like shit. I mean, his dad is worse, but
his dad's worse, but then like it's almost like you become who your parents are.
Yeah.
And that's what he became. He became what he hated. Again,
Right.
Like,
Anyway.
that's the strength of the movie. There's flaws with that movie too.
Yeah. And then like the cast is great. Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. There's a lot of controversy because it's a traditionally white character that they used they chose a black actor.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. Michael B. Jordan is a great actor.
Yeah.
And like you seen him, like he was in Chronicle, great. He was in Fruitvale Station, excellent. I mean, and then he was in Creed. I mean, him and Ryan Coogler together are great, but on their own they're great. Like I have no problem with Michael B. Jordan being casted as Johnny Storm. I was actually excited for that.
Yeah.
Because I like Michael B. Jordan a lot. And then Kate Mara as Sue Storm, great choice.
Yeah.
She's a very good actress.
She was great on House of Cards.
Miles Teller as Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards. Fine. I like Miles Teller.
yeah.
And that came out after.
I thought it was a little too young.
Well, they made all the characters young.
Yeah, but like Johnny Storm and Susan Storm are kind of younger.
Yeah.
And from what I remember in the comics, or maybe not Sue Storm. I think
Johnny's younger because he's the younger brother.
he's the younger brother. I know in the shitty movies with like the ones that came up before the most recent Fantastic Four movie, like twins. In the comics, Johnny Storm is the younger brother. I'm pretty sure. So I guess they like, yeah. So I don't mind with those two being younger. The actor they got for Ben Grimm, again, another great actor. But I just thought it was too young, and like I think that's again, I haven't seen the movie, but just by watching the trailers and from what you've told me, like insurmountable amount of why it's bad, I would imagine it's because those two characters aren't probably the characters that are known in the Fantastic Four, so it didn't really make sense.
Kind of, but that's not like the worst parts about them. And then
Okay.
the actor they got to play, I think I'm gonna say his name wrong. It's either Tori Kebbell or Rory Kebbell. That's probably not even his first name. I think the last name's right. But very good actor. But Doctor Doom was an atrocity.
Really?
He looked like melted down Mountain Dew cans onto each other. Like you made a fucking statue out of melted down Mountain Dew cans.
I kind of really want to watch
That
this
was him.
movie.
But like, their motivations were ridiculous. The way they got their powers was fine. I liked it because they brought in like the negative zone, which was fine. That was a good twist instead of sending them into space.
Mm-hmm.
I get it because it's something different, but it still makes sense.
Right.
But then after they get their powers, first of all, they leave Doom in negative zone. Granted, he fucking fell into a pit of quote like lava type substance. But then when they get back to Earth, because it's an interdimensional thing, and they're locked up, fucking Reed just leaves them all there and leaves. Fucking left Ben Grimm there, his best friend throughout the entire movie up to that. Is like, we're best friends. We're never going to leave each other. Best friends, never going to leave each other. Ben followed Reed to school, and Reed let him live with him. Best friends, never going to leave each other. And like, that's the whole thing. He fucking left them as the thing to be tested by the government for over a year.
See that to me, like that's I hate prejudging a movie before I see it, but then like from what you've told me about it, that doesn't sound like Reed Richards.
Exactly.
But
it's stupid because they hammered down that whole point up to that, like best friends never gonna leave each other, and then boom, just fucking drops him.
Yeah, and that doesn't make any sense because in the comics, Ben Grimm has issues with Reed Richards that aren't valid, but it makes for a good character, a well-written character, because Ben blames Reed for his deformity or his powers when it's really not Reed's fault, and Reed has to like remind him like it's not me, like but Ben and Reed are still.
They did do a little bit of that afterwards, like, but it was only after he left him that he got the opportunity.
So
to, like, this is your fault.
It would make sense that it is his fault, but that's not Reed Richards.
But it's not his fault. Like it's yeah. But like that Reed, the one thing they got right, well, yeah, he can stretch himself and he's a genius. Two things they got right. Dr. Doom. First, they were gonna make him Victor. They were gonna make him a computer hacker instead of like he's just as smart, if not as Reed Richards. Reed Richards is supposed to be the smartest person on the planet, right, in the Marvel comic universe or something like that. He's one of them. One of the top 3 or something like that.
Peter Parker is is supposed to be like almost just as smart as Reed Richards. But they don't. He's one. Yeah, he's one of them. It's Reed Richards, Peter Parker.
Hank Pym, right?
And Hank Pym. Tony Stark. Bruce Banner. There's a lot of them.
I think Reed Richards is supposed to be the
He might be the number one.
But yeah, anyway, they got that right. I liked the way that Kate Mara played Sue Storm, but you can tell when they did the reshoots, even though they put the reshoots like chronologically sooner than some of the other scenes, she had the worst wig on because she had to cut her hair for a different role, and like they made no like effort to make it look any similar.
Do you know most of the cast hasn't even seen that movie?
Oh yeah,
Miles Teller just never want to go see it
because they know it's terrible and they're like, yeah, it's a shitty movie. Like they openly admit it.
Yeah.
And then the way they played Doom. First of all, he was supposed to be a computer hacker. He's a scientist too, more or less, and he like has assisted them in their experiments, which led to them getting their individual powers. And in this, he goes with them. Thankfully, they kept him relatively the same, even though younger and less psychotic a little bit, until he gets trapped in the negative zone for over a year and comes back like a walking Mountain Dew can. And they just like they killed the character. Like he gets back and he's like, "What's?" And Reed asks him. He goes, Victor goes, "You're not prepared for what's coming." And Reed's like, "What is coming?" Doom. Boom. Okay. All right. Let's just fucking ham it up real bad. And then the editing, they get their powers like pretty, a little bit into the movie, and then you don't see any action for like another hour, 45 minutes. And even then, it's like 5 seconds.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. The movie was like super light on action.
Oh yeah.
The only thing is to like when it comes going back to adaptations, like as far as like the reasoning, like what makes a good adaptation or not. As much as I love Fantastic Four in the comics, and as much as I love Doctor Doom as a villain, I think he's one of the best villains ever written in comic book history because he transcends the Fantastic Four completely.
Oh yeah,
he is like a tactical villain for the Avengers too.
Yeah, he's
to the point
one
where
of the greatest villains
ever. Him and Magneto, I think, are the best written villains in the Marvel universe in general.
Marvel, yes.
Yeah. But here's the thing in movies, like, and I've made this point on the show before: just because something's in the comics doesn't mean it's good, or it works for the comics and doesn't work for movies. Victor Von Doom literally translates to Victor is Doom, and like when you watch those movies, it's like, of course this guy has an evil plan. His name is Victor is Doom. Like, I understand it's a staple, like he is the villain, but. I'm not saying don't change. You don't have to change Doctor Doom. I love that name, but like, I wouldn't mind if they changed his name for his real name, but still kept him as Doctor Doom and they kept his character because like, it's the same reason why like it's kind of stupid when Clark Kent and Superman's face are right next to each other in a paper saying they're both dead and nobody puts the two together. It's like, dude, you're talking to a guy whose name is Victor is Doom.
Yeah,
and you're surprised he has an evil scheme.
What?
You know, it's just I understand. It's not a it's
Like if your name was Connor Von Doom, I would never.
right,
together,
and you're
but
like you're and like if yeah, my name's Connor Von Doom, and then you get home and you realize your family's dead, and there's a picture of me there smiling, you'd be like, I would never suspect him, really, because I've been really sketchy our whole friendship. This isn't really me in real life, and like you've always like suspected me of doing weird things and like shady things, and then you're surprised I do this, and oh yeah, by the name, my name is Connor Von Doom. Like it's again, like if I were to ever make a Fantastic Four movie, I would make it very true to the comics, but I feel like I would have to change things that would need to transition the screen, and like that would be one of the things I had to change.
The one thing I will credit to this fan for tastic that because that's how they fucking stylized the name.
I didn't see where you're going there for a second. Now I get it.
Yeah, was the motivations for Doom were better than in the first two Fantastic Four movies.
Right. That and if they made the motivations to fit his name, being Victor is Doom, like then I would keep the name.
Well, I mean, like the reason he hates Reed and the other ones is because they left him in the Phantom Zone, not the Phantom, the Negative Zone.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Phantom Zone is
Superman.
They left him there, and then the cosmic, like whatever, showed him what he can accomplish and like how he can bring the Negative Zone to Earth and control it.
Right.
Much like Doom has Latveria in the comics. And like, so he has better motivations than he did, I think, in the first two, which his initial motivations was to get Sue from Reed.
Yeah, and of course he's going to. His name is Doom. Like,
Yeah.
He's
Doom.
gonna do something that brings doom.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. That movie is a fucking atrocity.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Fantastic Four is not a perfect story. It's kind of like it was like, as much I respect Stan Lee, he's not just one of the greatest comic book writers ever. He's one of the greatest storytellers ever. But like when you read Fantastic Four, you can tell like he was just getting into his form. It's kind of like when like when a band puts out a first album. Like very rarely is a band's first album their best album.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Less Than Jake with Pezcore. As much as I love that album, there's some songs that suck on there. Like, and Less Than Jake's my favorite band of all time. With Fantastic Four being like Stan Lee's first like Silver Age comic, like getting into that style where like superheroes are more than just blank slates and like boring personalities. They actually can be like characterized into people that are relatable, which is great. Fantastic Four totally led that, and it was the reason why
It was one of their most significant creations ever.
And it's saved the comic book industry. But like there is things in that story that just don't work well.
I think Fantastic Four is really, really hard to adapt.
Yes, it is. It's
But
very
I think
hard.
that
there are things that have to change.
granted, like, yeah, that's already a disadvantage, but I think that they've just done such a crappy job instead of like trying to make it easier to adapt, but in a good way and still keep like the original heart, spirit, and everything.
Yeah.
They just like threw all that shit to the wayside and are like, this is too hard. Let's do it like this instead.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think it's things that they're afraid to change because they're afraid of fan backlash. But at this point, like you got to try anything because like I want a good Fantastic Four movie.
Me too.
I want one.
I wanted this last one to be so good.
Yeah, I wish I would wish like it was really Superman that did it. Like if you really think about it, but when it comes to like I like Fantastic Four leading the pack as far as changing comic books forever. I kind of wish it did that for comic book movies. It would what a perfect story there for like the making of comic book movies and adapting comic book movies.
Yeah,
But it just never,
especially when it came out against the first two came out against the Spider-Man movies.
Yep.
Or at least Spider-Man 2 and 3. But like that should have been as huge as Spider-Man was and as successful, but just wasn't done right.
Marvel was in a dark place back then, like where DC is now when it comes to like their movies. Like back in the day, it was DC was the one killing it in the movies with, like not only with the Dark Knight trilogy, but even though Superman Returns was a bad movie, it was moderately successful with the critics and made money. It just wasn't a very good Superman movie.
Right.
But as a movie, it's really actually not bad. It's just there's
It's just not a good Superman.
It's
movie.
not a good. Yeah, it doesn't make sense for Superman.
Lipstick
Which is why I hate it.
somehow lifts up a kryptonite island.
Yeah, that was so stupid. Meanwhile, he has like a little piece of kryptonite in him, and he's like
dead.
almost
Yeah.
dead.
And like the X-Men movies that came out around the same time, and those were great. But the funny thing is, like, Kevin Feige, is this massive genius right now, the whole architect of the MCU.
Yep.
But he's been a producer on all the shitty Marvel properties adapted into comic book movies since, like, I don't know, like the late 90s maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I knew he was a producer for some of them, but
But at least now he turned it around and created like the most successful juggernaut ever, pretty much.
I guess that's something like forming into it. That's forming into your craft.
Yeah, but even just being a producer is like not. You don't really have being a regular producer. You don't really have too much influence. It's the executive producers.
it's the it is the executive producers, but like a producer can be a reason why a movie's bad because it's really it's the producer that has a lot of has a lot of the decision making.
Right.
As far as like seeing who directs, if you don't already have the screenplay, it's finding someone to write the screenplay. Be like there's casting directors, but you also hire the casting director.
Yeah.
So a producer it really has a lot to do with the movie.
And now like Lawrence Kasdan is Fox's like major producer for their movies.
Yeah.
And he's been a producer on all the best X-Men movies and the terrible X-Men movie, X3, Wolverine Origins, each of the Fantastic Four movies, and he rewrote parts of the newest Fantastic Four movie and like when they did reshoots, he pretty much directed them too. But it's funny because he's like done those shitty things, but the first two X-Men movies, Deadpool, and then First Class and Future Past, he had a big role in them, and getting them made. And it's just like it's funny, like you can see him going back and forth, but it's that happens with like any producer or director or actor or anything. It's a contrast. Like they're hugely successful things and they're fucking garbage. And then I guess Feige got that out of the way early.
Yeah. But Feige is the executive producer.
He's the president
or
of
the president
Marvel Studios.
now.
Now he
Yeah.
is.
But like he wasn't an executive producer for those past Marvel movies that weren't successful. Because
He was just a.
You're right. There's a huge
producer.
difference between executive producer and producer. A producer essentially is just like here's some money.
Yeah, they procure the money pretty much.
Yeah, like Jon Favreau on like some of the Marvel movies now. Like how he doesn't really have a lot to do with them, but he makes money from them for for financial contributions. Also too, Jon Favreau's adaptation of The Jungle Book is pretty good too.
It's damn good.
Even though it's not an adaptation, even though it's not a good adaptation of the original source material, it's a good adaptation of remake of the original Disney movie, which is very different from the book. I've never read the book, but I know.
I don't think for a Disney movie it would work well. There's some really like not children appropriate stuff in there.
Really?
Kind of. It's the way they've done it, like with the animated movie, and this one is much better. Especially like Disney wise,
Right?
I think fits them more. But that's a damn good adaptation. He's great.
Jon Favreau? Yeah.
Apparently he's an awesome DJ too.
He just seems like one of those dudes where he's at a party, everyone's like, John's here. Like, I want to say hi to John.
Yeah, I would love to hang out with him.
Yeah, he just seems like a cool guy. Like, not everything he's done has been successful. He directed Zathura, right?
I have no idea.
I think he did. I'm gonna look that up real fast because that movie was awful.
Yeah, he seems like a real cool guy. I know he's been on the Nerdist podcast, I think twice, but the one time he was on it, like normally the Nerdist podcasts are like an hour, and especially this came out like years ago, like when he was like doing a lot of shit all at once, and they're like, oh, we don't want to keep you too long, and he goes, no, I got another hour to kill, so he stayed for 2 hours in the podcast just because he wanted to hang out.
Yeah,
which is great. And like with Swingers and Chef, he learned how to cook, bought a food truck, actually to promote the movie, went from town to town to festival in his food truck promoting the movie and making food for people.
That's awesome.
Which is awesome. And he just seems like a great guy. Yeah, I fucking love him.
He's a well liked Hollywood type of guy. And yeah, he did direct Zathura.
And
that movie has a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Huh.
I remember seeing that movie and being like, that movie's not good. But he also made Elf, which is one of the greatest Christmas movies ever made.
Yes. And Cowboys and Aliens, which wasn't that good. That's an example of not such a good adaptation, but that's because the movie itself is not that good. But
the comic book was never that good either.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept that I just think doesn't work.
Yeah, but that's actually his only rotten movie. And I like Cowboys and Aliens more than Zathura. And I did not like Cowboys and Aliens.
But that was also terrible, but it's not.
That was a Paramount movie. That was when Paramount was originally supposed to lead the MCU.
Yeah.
Before it was bought out by Disney.
Thank God it got bought out by Disney.
Yeah, because if you look at Iron Man 2, like, I feel like that might have been the direction the MCU might have went, and thank God when Disney bought it, it changed.
Mm-hmm.
I think Disney saved MCU.
Yeah,
straight up. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think. Well, yeah, that's definitely. I don't want to say it's a fact, but it's pretty close to a fact. Yeah, Cowboys and Aliens. Like, why would you ever make that movie? Like, I remember I saw the movie and I read the comic afterwards because it was at OCC library for like comic book month. I was like, dude, this comic's like not that good.
I know.
It's not terrible.
It was something different. But like another bad adaptation is Gotham, in my opinion. I know people love that show and are saying, oh, the second half of the second season is so amazing. I don't give a shit. I watched enough of it to know it's not good. I don't like the way they adapted anything. Granted, they're putting a different spin on the Batman history because they're making the main character is Jim Gordon, which I like, and I like Ben McKenzie. He's a good actor, good for the role.
And Jim Gordon is one of the best comic book characters of all time, too.
Yeah, and one of the most important. But,
yeah.
you know, it's not him that's wrong with it. It's just the way that they're changing the villains and the way that they're casting them. I don't know. Granted, the guy who plays the Penguin was a good choice, although I think he's a better choice for the Joker or the Riddler. But, you know, he's fine. He does a decent job. You know, there's just stuff about it that doesn't work that I don't like how they're going about it.
Right. But, I mean, a lot of people do like that show. It's critically pretty well received, too. It's got like an 80. I think it's in the 80s with Rotten Tomatoes. But also, too, like with television, you got to give Rotten Tomatoes. You got to take it with a grain of salt, Rotten Tomatoes for television, because there's not as many television critics as there are movie critics.
Right. Plus, they usually those reviews are based off like they'll get the first 4 episodes of a show, like of a season, and then that's how they base their reviews.
That's why like Supergirl has a really high rating on Rotten Tomatoes,
which is surprising because their first 4 episodes were terrible.
Yeah. And like I see that, and
every now and then, like they'll do, depending on how big the show is, like they'll do episodic reviews.
Yeah,
and adjust it, which I think is why Supergirl's rating is that high because the episodes did get better up to a point. Yeah. Plus, there's some really highly rated shows critically on there that are fucking terrible shows.
Walking Dead has been going down though critically. I think season 6, which is the current season, is holding like a 68.
Deservingly so. Well, I mean, I haven't watched it since like halfway through season 3, but fuck that show.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped at season 4.
See, I don't like the first 2 seasons. That first of all, that was one of the best pilots I've ever seen in my life.
Oh yeah,
the first 2 seasons were fantastic.
The first 3 for me were amazing. I love season 3. Season 4, I think, is where it dropped off for me.
And a lot of they're mixed on their adaptation. I think they do adapt a lot of things really well. Because that comic series, I haven't read all of it, but what I have read is awesome.
Right,
it's fucking great. And they are faithful with a lot. They do a pretty good job at adapting a lot of it. But the changes they make, I think, are pretty dumb sometimes, or the way they just adapted them just doesn't work out. And like, I'm surprised because Robert Kirkman, who created the comic series, is like, oh yeah, these changes are great, even though like most people hate certain changes that just don't work well. But you know, it's whatever. I don't know. Just I think it lost its way.
Yeah,
and just got poorly done. And now, especially like after all the hate they're getting about like how they're designing the show and like how they're like just fucking with the audience, I'm glad I stopped watching.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, how long are we getting into this? Holy crap, it's almost an hour and a half. Yeah, so all right. We pretty much got into like how like I guess a general consensus of adaptation, like for like at least that from what I understand from what you've said, is that changes are necessary, but as long as the essence and what makes the character still stays, that's what makes the story work.
Yeah.
Because every time an adaptation gets made from a comic book movie or comic book television show from the original source material, whenever you change the character and like a trait, and then you try to adapt the same story that was from a comic book, things get lost in translation.
Yeah, because a lot of the times they'll take out a certain trait or personality characteristic that works in that story that they're trying to adapt.
Yeah.
And it just like
And it doesn't make
cause
sense.
problems.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of going back to we brought it up with Daredevil, so I don't really need another example as far as like, Matt Murdock, staring in the rain or something like that, like pretty much giving away that he's Daredevil without saying he's Daredevil. Something like that. So hopefully, comic book, but like even though there's still bad comic book movies that come out, it's insane how much better they have gotten. And like we live in a time where like if
we're fucking spoiled.
Yeah, we are spoiled. We're so spoiled. Like, and again, even though Batman vs Superman is a terrible movie, if that movie came out 20 years ago, I still would not like it, but I don't think I would hate it as much as I do now.
Right.
Because like you see all these prime examples of how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like there's always room for evolution, change, or better involvement for anything, and like you could take a huge step backwards. So that's the reason. That's another reason why I hate that movie. I had like the mountain.
What DC
of reasons.
needs to do is get rid of Zack Snyder and let either Greg Berlanti, Jeff Johns, or Bruce Timm take over.
Yep.
Because I mean, granted, Jeff Johns was like a producer on the Green Lantern movie. Greg Berlanti wrote the original draft for it that was then changed. But like Jeff Johns is one of the best comic book writers of all time.
Oh yeah,
hands down.
Saved Aquaman.
He's written some of the greatest stories of all time. Greg Berlanti is doing a great job in the TV universe. He created Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow. Granted, they have their ups and downs, but like he's overall very successful
Right,
with it.
and that might not be, and like there's other people involved in that too.
Yeah. He can't have full control over all of them now because he's very busy. And then Bruce Timm, and I forget who his partner is, but was I think in charge of Batman the Animated Series. If not, he did a lot of work for it.
He did. He was a major part of it. The Bruce that whole animated, like the Justice League, Superman animated.
Yeah. I know the Justice League ones. Yeah. Plus, he's been like the biggest part of the DC animated universe, like movie wise, which are 99% of the time fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
The DC animated movies are awesome.
Yeah, they are. I just recently watched Justice League War, which you recommended to me, and that movie that should have been Batman vs Superman.
Right.
That movie.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah,
so good.
If you haven't watched that.
And Flashpoint was really good. The Flashpoint Paradox is a really good movie too. The only criticism I have with that movie is that like everyone looked the same, like body wise. Like,
but like the story is great.
The story was great. Yeah, like dude, even like
which was written by Jeff Johns, the comic book. But yeah, like Bruce Timm has done amazing work, and he knows his shit, and he's written for the TV and comics, and I think he knows what he's doing. And I think he should be, and he's doing the Killing Joke too, the movie.
There we go.
Just let him do it. Just fucking get rid of Zack Snyder.
Yeah, just keep him. Well, I think they should keep him as a cinematographer.
All right, yeah, that's his strength.
Yeah, that again, because I don't. Because like the guy obviously is talented in a way, and I think his movies look absolutely gorgeous. There are like Batman vs Superman. If you just showed me still images of it, I'd be like, that looks great.
Yeah,
and I think if you were to get Ben Affleck as a director for Batman movie and they brought on Zack Snyder as a cinematographer, I would be super excited for it.
I'd be completely fine with that.
Yeah. But he's a terrible director.
Yeah. Although I will give him credit, I don't like the movie, but he did an admirable job on Watchmen. Because Watchmen,
I like that movie.
Talk about like something that's pretty much unfilmable, like to adapt.
Yeah.
He did. I think he did an admirable job.
The more I hated that movie when I first saw it. I really hated it. And over time, I've really actually grown to like that movie a lot because You're right. It was always said to be the most unfilmable movie, and he pulled it off. I think he pulled it off. So that's why I don't think Zack Snyder's a bad director. Overall, I think Batman vs Superman is just a terrible movie. It's just what happened, you know.
Yeah, and you know what, David S. Goyer is, he contributed a lot to the Dark Knight trilogy, but he's not that good.
No, he's not a good screenwriter. And like the Dark Knight trilogy, the reason why it was immensely successful was because of Nolan.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like
Easily.
Yeah,
Dude, have him fucking come back to direct something. Although he wouldn't.
He's not going
He's
to.
not going to.
You know,
but I don't think he would fit into this universe that they're doing now. How they're getting more comic book.
Yeah, his movie,
instead of realistic.
He takes fantasy. The Nolan's strength is taking fantasy and trying to make it as real as possible.
Yeah.
Like with Interstellar, like it could be sometimes it's a flaw, but like it worked, but it works way more times than it doesn't. Like with Interstellar, like trying to explain the science behind of like why like what happens in that movie without spoiling it, doesn't like again to a scientist it doesn't really make sense, but for like the everyday moviegoer who's not a scientist, like it's engaging.
Yeah.
So like that's Nolan's big strength, and also too like he's an awesome director. Like
Oh, he's fantastic. And all his movies are beautiful.
yeah, they all look great too. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know. I think it's definitely over an hour and a half we've been doing this. I think it's
Hour and 31 minutes.
Hour and 31. Yeah, I think we talked about adaptation enough, pretty much. Unless you have something else to say.
No, I'm pretty much all set.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, thanks for listening for the whole hour and a half. If you listened from the beginning to end of this whole hour and a half podcast, leave a comment in the comment section saying that you did. Also, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and also follow us on Twitter. I am at Less Than Connor.
I'm at Rick Pat Mick.
And if you want to follow actual Awesome Sunday Show Twitter account, it's at Awesome Sun Show, because Twitter's really
I knew you were gonna say
Twitter's really generous with their letter the characters for their letters. I'm screwing that up. Don't worry about it. So yeah, just follow it. Also too, expect a couch review sometime next week of The Jungle Book, and also expect a couch review of me, Pat, and Hoffman of Captain America: Civil War the weekend it comes out.
Yeah. Aren't you doing one with your dad?
Yeah, I actually that's on hold right now just because we watched the movie, and also we just haven't had time to film it yet. So that is coming. Essentially, it's just kind of like when my dad wants to do it. I think he's a little nervous because he's never done it before. So again, it's coming. I'm not like it's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and there's a lot to talk about that movie. So yeah, that's coming. That's either going to come before Civil War or after Civil War. So I didn't forget about it.
And
I forgot about The Jungle Book.
The couch review
on Twitter
at The Couch Review.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you.